Button mashing. We've all been there. You're playing a game against someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, and they're pressing so many buttons at once that for a moment, you wonder if the controller can handle the stress. But amid the chaos and confusion, sometimes that friend will stumble upon an input that throws out a special move. Maybe it's a Hadoken or a Shoryuken, or maybe they'll accidentally pop their V-trigger. Whatever it is, these moments are usually followed up by an excited, "Dude, what the freak?"
Talk about a comeback of the season.
While for the casual player, special moves are new and exciting, for experienced players, they're just an everyday occurrence. Quarter circles, charge moves, EX specials, these are gameplay defining moves that are locked behind a skill wall for most people. But what if I told you there was once a fighting game that got rid of technical prerequisites? A game that was designed to be played on a keyboard and was made to bridge the gap between casual and competitive play. That game is the focus of today's video, and it was called Rising Thunder. Rising Thunder was developed by Radiant Entertainment, under the stewardship of Tom and Tony Cannon, the co-founders of the Evolution Fighting series, and Seth Killian, one of the most highly respected figureheads in the FGC and a former employee of both Sony and Capcom. Rising Thunder was a 2D mech fighting game, which was built around ease of access for new players. Rising Thunder had 3 core development goals: be primarily focused on online play, make it free to play, and, most importantly, make the barrier for entry lower than most other fighting games. We're gonna start by focusing on that last one. Rising Thunder was designed for the PC. It can be played with a controller or a fight stick, but it was specifically designed to be played on a keyboard. Because of this, Rising Thunder intentionally omits complex inputs like quarter circles and simplifies special moves so that they can be executed with a single button press. Moves are put on a cooldown timer similar to abilities in a MOBA. So instead of projectile spamming to wall out your opponent, you've got to wait a few seconds before you can use your special again. Rising Thunder's design philosophy is sort of similar to that of Marie Kondo, in that before you put something in the game, you have to ask yourself, does it spark joy? Except instead of joy, we're asking if it sparks rewarding and compelling gameplay, and if the answer is no, you can safely remove that feature and substitute it for something better. So, do complex inputs make a game more rewarding or compelling? To Seth Killian, the answer is no. And that while complex inputs do make the game more difficult, they do so in an artificial way. Killian said, quote, "I don't know if Counter-Strike would be better if, to throw a grenade you had to do a 360 motion with the mouse. It would change the game, and that would have an impact on gameplay, but does it make it a better game? Not that I can tell." And this philosophy of leaving in only what sparks joy permeates the whole game. Rising Thunder is built around movement and decision making, around knowing when to block, when to jump, how to space yourself, and how to time attacks properly. By making the technical aspect of the game simpler, players can shift their attention away from their own execution and start actually playing against their opponent. Because when you don't have to worry about whether a Shoryu is going to come out or not, you can start thinking about your opponent's habits and what you can do to exploit them. In other words, you can start playing mind games earlier instead of having to learn all of your character's inputs beforehand. Now, an obvious response to Rising Thunder's simplicity is that it's a dumbed down fighting game, that it's too simple, and that players should just get good instead of looking for something easier. After all, why should someone who has spent countless hours learning to do something the hard way respect someone who is willing to take a shortcut? But if you've watched Core A Gaming's video about the simplest fighting games, and if you haven't, I'd highly recommend it, you probably already have a good idea of what titles like Rising Thunder mean for the community. It's not a be-all end-all for the genre. No one is asking Tekken players or DBFZ players to move to a simpler game, and no one is asking Street Fighter or Guilty Gear to tone down their complexity for the sake of newer players. Although Street Fighter V kind of did that. Anyway, games like Rising Thunder are an in for players who would otherwise be turned away by the sheer difficulty of most big fighting games. Being able to learn and compete without spending hours upon hours in training mode is a good way to get new players interested in the genre and opens the door for players to move on to more complex fighting games down the road. Basically, it can act as a stepping stone that makes the transition from noob to FGC veteran a little bit easier. So, the appeal of Rising Thunder is that it was an accessible fighting game with a low skill floor. It was released on PC to be played with the keyboard so more players could get into it. It was built around online play so that people could play it more casually, and it was released free to play. On top of this, The game was funded by a number of outside sources, which meant that there was no crowdfunding campaigns that slowed down development or created expectations that could not possibly be met. With $4.5 million to work with, Radiant Entertainment could put all of their time and effort into creating a really good game. And to top it off, Killian was adamant that the game wouldn't rely on predatory microtransactions or DLC to turn a profit. In fact, pretty much everything was free, with a cosmetic store model planned similar to that of Dota 2. Sounds like a recipe for success, right? This is where our story takes a turn, as Rising Thunder never made it out of alpha. While the game was making noise in the FGC community with the release of an alpha build in August of 2015, Radiant Entertainment was bought out by Riot Games a year later, meaning that Rising Thunder was pretty much cancelled before it was even released. Still, the community saw the potential of the game and didn't want it to die, doing everything they could to organize events and keep people interested in the dying title. After months of trying to get a grassroots community going, Radiant was able to give their fans the send-off they deserved: Rising Thunder Community Edition. This included local multiplayer, tweaks and quality of life improvements, and, most importantly, open source servers, meaning that anyone could go in and tinker with the game to make it better. It was a modder's dream, and meant that the game could live on through its community. But if the story ended there, it wouldn't be very satisfying, would it?
So it's been a bit. So back in 2016, when we joined forces with Riot, I said that we were going to go on the hole for a while, right? And I want to be able to let people in on maybe like the worst kept secret in the universe, which is I can confirm that we are working on a fighting game for Riot.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
It wasn't Rising Thunder, it was a whole lot better. A Riot fighting game with Runeterra champions. One of the big issues that fans had with Rising Thunder wasn't the gameplay or the simplified controls. Rather, it was the game's IP, or lack thereof. Unknown mechs fighting each other just isn't all that interesting. There are tons of good games out there, but the ones that tend to dominate the market are the ones that have strong IPs backing them up. Mario Kart and Super Smash Bros. Have the Nintendo universe. DBFZ has Dragon Ball. Even Tekken and Street Fighter have built up their canon over the years of relevance in popular culture. No matter how good your game mechanics are, it's difficult to outdo 30+ years of gaming history. But swap out those unknown mechs for iconic Riot characters, and suddenly the tables have turned. So what do we know about this fighting game, which has been dubbed Project L? Honestly, not very much. From the footage we have, fans have deduced a number of theories about Project L's gameplay mechanics. First is the presence of 4 bars in the same place as Rising Thunder's special move indicators. This means that, in all likelihood, champions in Project L will have 3 basic abilities and an ultimate ability, similar to champion abilities in League of Legends. On top of this, Rising Thunder featured a juggle meter, which, upon filling up, would grant the character being juggled brief invincibility, allowing them to fall to the ground and escape a prolonged punish. While neither of these features are confirmed yet, it seems likely that many of the mechanics from Rising Thunder are being carried over, suggesting that Project L will be the spiritual successor of that abandoned project. Outside of a few short clips, Riot has kept a tight seal on the game. While Seth Killian left Riot Games in early 2019, fans are hopeful that his input and design philosophy will help shape the game for the remainder of its development. Plus, with the Cannon brothers still on board, along with the resources of Riot and their associated IPs, hopes are high that Project L could be one of the biggest fighting game releases in recent memory. And while Rising Thunder may not have been the release many were hoping for, its spirit will live on bigger than its fans could have ever dreamed. This video is made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. Massive thank you to everyone on this list, and shout out to Arknox, Sammy, Shampoo, Weeboo, Nathan, Nate, Mauve, Sierra, Foxy, Lyra, and Spartacus for being platinum supporters, and an extra special shout out to Raffi, Noodles, Marco, and Steven for being diamond supporters. If you want to support our channel and unlock perks, check out the Patreon link in the description below, or join our Discord server where we take suggestions for videos like this one. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah, thanks for watching.